This video will review how to report on volunteers if you are a member that recruits, trains, or manages volunteers. We'll walk through how to complete the paper form and then where to send it after you finished it. Again, you will complete the volunteer report or volunteer form. It's a paper copy. You can use a PDF and type into it or print it out and write in and rescan it, whatever works for you. This form will be sent to either Holly or me by the 15th of the month for the previous month. For example, volunteers that you recruited, trained, or managed in September will be reported on or by October 15th. There are just a few things that you'll have to include when reporting on volunteers. The first being a volunteer ID or code name. That'll be the same each time you report on them if they are a recurring volunteer. You'll report on the number of volunteers. So sometimes you'll just have one individual that you're reporting on. Sometimes it'll be a group. So you'll at least have one volunteer in each entry. You'll identify whether the volunteer is recurring or episodic and the total number of hours they served in each group, whether they were an individual or multiple people. So I'm going to show you how to fill out the form with some examples. This is what the PDF looks like. You can find it on HHCK's website. It'll have the most up-to-date form to use. It's under the Current Member Resources tab. So again, you can type in this form, you can print it out and write on it, whatever works best. But you'll fill out your name, where you're serving at, and then you'll list what the reporting period is. So we'll say I'm reporting on September volunteers, and I'm reporting on the ones that I've recruited, trained, or managed to do similar services that I'm providing, or housing services. This can mean case management, teaching financial literacy classes, building or repairing a home. Those are the types of volunteers you're going to report on. If your service site has someone that comes and answers the phone and you're involved like on an episodic basis or intermittent basis with managing them, that's not someone you're going to report on because they're mostly providing administrative duties. You're only reporting on volunteers that are providing housing services. So for example, I'm going to enter an individual that is volunteering. She is one person in her group, so I'll enter 1 under the number of volunteers. This volunteer is on a recurring basis, so I am going to report on her each month because the number of hours that she volunteered could change each month, and we want to capture all the hours that they served. So we'll say this volunteer volunteered 12 hours this month. And then say we have a volunteer group come in. It's a college and they're doing an alternative fall break or something like that. There's 8 volunteers in this group. They're only serving or volunteering one time, so we're going to label them as episodic. And then this is where it gets a little more complex, not too bad, but you're going to report on the total number of hours served for all of the volunteers. So say that the volunteers served 8 hours for 2 days, so that's 16 total hours, and there were 8 of them. So you're going to calculate 16 hours times 8 volunteers, and you'll get to 128 hours. So that's what you'll enter, because again, it's 8 volunteers volunteering for 8 hours for 2 days. If you have questions on how to calculate that, you can call me or Holly and we'll walk you through that. So it can be any variety. You're going to figure out what applies to you and your site and the types of volunteers that you're working with. Say you have a couple of just individuals, maybe they're from Rotary or Kiwanis and they volunteer recurring each month. And it doesn't even have to be each month with recurring. That can mean every other month, a few times a year. And I know that's tricky because you might not know if they're going to come back. So my recommendation would be to just initially put everyone as episodic unless you do know that they're volunteering again at some point during the rest of your service here. So say you have these 3 individuals from Rotary. We're going to say they're recurring every other month. And so they started serving in September and they volunteer 1 hour each month. So that's only going to be 3 hours that we log because it was 3 volunteers for 1 hour. You don't have to put this explanation in here as long as you get the calculation right. If you want to add that explanation, you're welcome to. So this recurring group that I just entered, Rotary, they're only volunteering every other month. So I'm only going to report on them in those months. So if they're not going to volunteer again until November, I'll record them in the November report. As always, if you have any questions on how to report on volunteers, you can call me or Holly. Once you have completed this report, again, you'll send the copy to either Holly or me by the 15th of the month for the previous month.